Hi, this is Mike, co-host of Realistic Sustainability, the podcast, which you probably already know, but I'm also the author of A Beginner's Guide to Greening Your Life. That was the book that led to our Facebook page, our Facebook group, and, well, even this show. It offers tips on promoting your positive footprint while decreasing your carbon footprint. So, if you want to read what started all of this, get A Beginner's Guide to Greening Your Life, available on Amazon, eBay, Etsy, or just visit greeningyourlife.org for more information. Thank you for joining the sustainable movement and promoting a greener future.
Hilton brings you new ways to stay, with experiences that let you capture the glory days. Introducing the Graduate Hotels. Each inspired by local college towns, these stays are always original and never boring. Get in touch with traditions all across the country and enjoy a stay that's a class above the rest. Book at Graduate Hotels with Hilton Honors Points at Hilton.com. It's a win-win. Hilton, for the stay.
Hi, and welcome back to Realistic Sustainability. I'm Mike, and of course, I'm here with Nick.
It's been a long, hot, rainy, sweaty day, but I'm so happy to finally be here with you.
It's funny because that's what I was going to talk to you about. You know how we always have that personal banter in the very beginning was, holy crap, how are we surviving this rainy season?
It took a brief pause, for a few days, which I was thankful for, but it's definitely been wet. It's been wetter than I can ever remember. We're now into almost, I think technically we're into summer, and it's still wet.
It is very wet here. For those listeners who don't know, we live in Michigan, and apparently it's April here because it has rained and rained hard. Matter of fact, I was just recording a short that will come out later talking about weird weather, and I was recording it during a massive rainstorm with a tornado warning. So that was pretty fitting.
Yeah, the irony is that you're right. It's raining like it's April, but it feels like it's Florida.
Oh,
It's so
the,
humid.
the humidity. I keep telling the wife that a long time ago I read a book about climate change, and it talked about the different regions, and they claimed that Michigan would be much like Florida, that it would kind of revert back and create this jungle type atmosphere. And I said, if that ever happens, we're out of here. Thank goodness we've already started a plan to work our way to Hawaii because it's starting to feel like Florida.
Yeah, it's nasty. I walked outside and within 5 minutes I was drenched in sweat. And then, to make matters worse, so it's really humid and it's real wet and it's gross, and because it's so humid, it kind of stinks outside. Never actually doesn't have that good spring smell. And I walked out of the grocery store, and it was like someone was raining sweat on me. It was a warm rain in the middle of a humid day, and I felt like Forrest Gump. It was terrible. I was like, I don't know what to do. I was like, it's nasty, warm rain. I don't know if I'd prefer fat rain, hot rain, rain that came in from the side, or rain that comes straight up. And my wife just looked at me, but she knew I meant it because it was gross. It was disgusting.
It is well, but there is one good thing about all of this rain. Anybody who's been watching the Greening Your Life Facebook page, my garden is bigger than me. I have plants that I continuously have to go out day in and day out and trim the heck out of. We've already pulled or picked. I've been told not to use pulled anymore. I've been using it in the shows. I have already picked more than 10 squash, and we're getting to a point where it's already becoming challenging to use them all.
Why is pulling bad phrase?
I will say a family member has said, I don't know what that means because I always talk about pulling vegetables, pulling them from the garden. They said the word is pick. You're supposed to pick things from a garden. So I'm trying to make that change.
Okay, well then from now on, when you speak to that family member, you tell them when they go to the grocery store, I want them to pick things from the shelves, not pull them from the shelves.
That's how I know that the show gets listened to, is that I get these little comments here and there from other people. So I'm okay with it. As long as they're listening, I'll take the feedback.
I don't think it's an incorrect use of the word, just because you did grasp the piece of fruit and pulled on it to take it off the plant. It wasn't like you whistled and they came running to the porch. But also, I want this to be very clear. I said fruit. That's right. Summer squash is a fruit.
Oh, I
For
get all
anyone,
that stuff mixed up. I'm pretty sure tomato is a berry. Like, there's all kinds of different categories that I don't think things fit into.
berries a fruit, bud.
Yep.
It's all fruit.
So it has all this weather has absolutely supercharged. I mean, granted, I have pretty good soil to begin with, but it has absolutely supercharged that garden. I've got peppers we've already picked and put in food. We've got things coming out left and right. Plus the city gardens, all the edible landscape project plants are doing freaking great.
That's
We're
awesome.
You've got so far people are harvesting green beans, lettuce, kale, strawberries, cucumbers, zucchini, squash, and this is just stuff I'm seeing people take so far. So there's a pumpkin out there that's like the size of my like chest. It is huge. So the rain does have a good reason, but I'm starting to feel like it's a part of the Crow movie. I just feel like it can't rain all the time.
Well, in that movie, a lot of people get shot, so we're gonna hope that doesn't happen. And yeah, no, I agree. It is raining way, way too much. I will say one more note about your garden. The last time I was over, you picked, pulled, cut, removed, trimmed, however you want to use it, a bunch of pieces of green from your garden. You know, some were having picked, were already wilted, some were fresh clippings. My turtles destroyed those. I mean, I sent you a picture of like as soon as I put it in there biting on it, it was gone that night, like all of it.
Well, there's more. That's from the lettuce and spinach, and there's always a little bit that kind of wilts off to the side, and I usually just let it hit the soil. It's not a big deal, but if it can be eaten and be used, we will continue every time you come over, collect it all up. So if they like it, let's get it to them.
I dumped so much in the one tank you could hardly even see water. It just completely covered it like it was a swamp. Within an hour, it was almost gone. Like they just ate and ate and ate and ate and ate. And it's way better than it really is better for them than the food they normally get. They're starting to get pyramiding, which is the scoots, which the scales of on a turtle shell are actually called scoots. And when they start to deform, instead of having a nice smooth shell, they start to get pointed like a pyramid. That means they're getting an unbalanced diet. They're getting too much protein, or they're getting food that is too rich for the age of the turtle. And my turtles are past sexual maturity, so they're becoming adults. And so they need more greens, they need more fruits and vegetables, and way less worms and all the good stuff they love.
Gotcha. Well, that's all right. We've got fruits and vegetables that we don't have to. I don't know. They might like cherry tomatoes. Those are already starting to mature also. So
I don't know about tomatoes. I have to make sure they can have the acid content.
gotcha. Well, so I wanted to talk about the rain thing, but what I really wrote down as our early banter before the show is that pipeline burst that I showed you in the Gulf of Mexico that seemed to turn our Gulf of Mexico into Sauron's Eye.
Yeah.
Remember that we were watching that? You and I were camping, and of course, as I see this come across my phone in the news, I show you.
Uh-huh.
So apparently they've got that resolved. But what in the heck was that?
That was a reason why you don't do something. It was a perfect example of why you don't do what they did.
And for any listener who hasn't seen this, and if you haven't, you probably did see it and thought it was a hoax or a joke. A oil pipe, a petroleum pipe burst in the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico and somehow ignited, turning the fire was coming up through the water, which is not intuitive to me at times. But so as this oil pushed up, because of course oil and water don't mix, parts of it were on fire, creating what I still believe looks like Sauron's Eye from, am I saying that right, from the Lord of the Rings?
It's Sauron. I wasn't gonna correct you, but
Really?
yeah.
Well,
Well,
you should on that one. But
it's Lord of the, listen, if I pick a fight with every person that messes with a pop culture reference, we'll be here all day.
so that's what I originally wanted to talk about. That was an amazingly terrible event.
Yeah, it's sad when something is spectacular and in scale or grandiose in scale, but in the negative connotation, it's terrible that we even have to have this conversation. That kind of stuff shouldn't even be happening in today's day and age. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I want people to have fuel. I want people to be able to heat their homes and stuff. I just don't think we should be running those types of pipelines through water, through huge bodies of water that are teeming with wildlife and that are on, I can't imagine the amount of species that go through there on yearly cycles for migrating and reproduction purposes. It's all messed up now. Everything's going to have to be clean. It's going to take years.
Well, and the reason why I wanted to bring that up, because that actually will kind of move us into our topic today, which was I want to talk about what the future electrical grid should look like. Now, do we necessarily know 100%? No, because there's still people fighting over what that electrical grid should look like and the food and the feedstocks that will go into it. But sometimes we want to talk about it just so people are aware. And so as they see little changes, it doesn't alert them as a negative or, become scary because they do it one little piece at a time, mainly because they have to. But it always causes some kind of Bill Gates conspiracy. So let's just talk about it.
I agree. Let's talk about it. And I'm going to preface this topic with two things. Something I haven't said in a long time. It's an oldie but a goodie, so I'm bringing it back around. And the other thing is that people don't know, or the average person probably doesn't know or isn't aware that our current grid is a production on demand system. There's no fail safe. There's no real way for them to build up a supply of energy. They don't have any real energy stores. So that's why they send those notices out in the mail during what will be the hot parts of the year or the super cold parts of the year. They tell you that the rates are going to go up because they need to try to meet the production for the demand. And they can't always do that. Now, to pigeonhole into my favorite statement, people fear what they don't understand.
I
And
kind of knew that
people,
was the one. I knew it.
you had to know it. People don't understand the concept of a new grid that's different than what they already have. They don't even understand the grid they already have. People fear what they don't understand, and I'm not insinuating that people aren't intelligent or that they're stupid. I don't think anything like that. I think every person is intelligent. I just think that when there's a lack of obvious literature or a lack of reasons in your day-to-day life to educate yourself, you tend just to take things for granted. And our energy grids are, even our plumbing, any bit of our infrastructure is taken for granted by most of the people that utilize it. And when you take things for granted, you don't take the time to really develop an appreciation for how they work, what keeps them going. And energy grid is one of those things. So when people start spouting off about future grid, when we do need a system that is designed better so it can meet the needs and requirements of our day-to-day life, but also if there's any type of a disaster, if something terrible happens and knocks out, like what if the big production plants that do most of the power burn all the coal? What if a huge tornado hits them? This is Michigan. Like what if that happens?
People tend to forget how brittle our system is on that on demand that you're talking about because remember a lot of times there's coal as a feedstock, natural gas, nuclear. There is no turning up and down a nuclear plant. There is no real turning up and down a coal plant. The very few that we have that can be dialed up and down a little bit is like a natural gas. You burn a little more and turn the turbine a little quicker. Most of that stuff is running at a standard rate, or we start turning it down and shutting down different ovens within the system. But it's very difficult. And everybody's heard me talk about in the UK where they have to buy energy from France during the first commercial of the most popular show because everybody turns on a kettle at the same time. It's very, very difficult to balance a grid, especially through anticipation. And that's what we do. We track everybody's use and then we anticipate it. Our current grid hasn't been truly updated. And I know, yes, there is some different technologies out there. I don't need the emails telling me it's not exactly the same, but really the technology hasn't changed much since Tesla and Edison used to fight about it. It is an old brittle grid and can be taken out with ease. Honestly, squirrels can do it, solar flares can do it, and they take out whole regions with cascading failures. So that's the first things first. Understand that what we have doesn't work anymore. It's not gonna function in a society that requires electricity. And I don't care who you are, 99% of the people who are in our country at least, and I'm assuming others, need electricity. We've become dependent on our electricity. We'd all like to think that if the power went out, we would be just fine. But going into that second month, you're going to feel very, very different. So looking at the current grid, did you know that there's 3 grids connected together in the United States?
Like master grids. Like I mean, like I honestly did not know that. I knew there was something like that, but I also know that they're broke down into smaller areas because there's lots of times where half the houses on one block will lose all power, and the other half are fine.
Yeah, there's
So
different switch grids like that where they try to trigger a block, if you will, so it doesn't cascade any further. So you'll have segments of areas that go out, they'll have to go in and fix them because really there's only one or two lines in and out of that area. Well, the United States, consider the United States split in half, but don't count Texas. You have an eastern grid that is and a western grid
Okay.
along with a Texas grid. That's why I always say the only state that could actually leave currently from the United States is Texas. It has its own grid. In the past, California talked about leaving the United States, and I never even once considered it because they'd have to do it in the dark. They
Yeah.
don't have their own grid. So really Texas is the only place that could leave, although it doesn't make sense for them to do so. Now, knowing that the old grid is this brittle, a future grid has to be durable. It has to be resilient, especially with climate change, changing weather. There's not a lot of gray area now. We're going to get catastrophic attacks on just about everything from the weather. I mean, at this point, we've got tornadoes going as far down as Alabama. We're coming into hurricane season. We know there's been flood after flood after flood. Grid has to withstand those things. And if there is failures, they have to be isolated into very small areas. Okay, so
Yeah.
when we talk about the next grid, we've talked about in the past microgrids or micro smart grids. That's what these will have to be. These microgrids will be town by town or even section of town or block by block where they have their own grid for each individual section. The cool thing about that is that it can allow inputs. So if you have solar panels on your house or I have a little wind turbine in my backyard, it can be added into the grid from anywhere and still be conditioned just fine and be shared throughout the neighborhood so that consumers doesn't have to always produce the exact amount needed. They
Well,
can just make up the difference.
absolutely. And then also, they had people in their pocketbooks when people do off or have that kind of stuff. It helps. It helps with their bill. It lessens their usage. It kind of counterbalances what they're actually using up. So it's something to look at for most people. I wish I could afford to do solar. I would do my whole roof in solar if I could.
Well, I think I recently posted on my personal Facebook account a tweet from someone who worked from someone who worked in the industry, the energy industry, talking about solar, and said the biggest problem is there's times where you collect too much, and then you end up turning the meter backwards, which I find it funny because he called it a problem.
He calls it a problem because he doesn't want people not to be spending money. He wants them to spend money if he's in the industry. And if you're turning the meter backwards, that means that the consumers essentially is paying you.
Right. And so the future grid is going to require inputs from all over the place, from all of us. We're going to, you've heard me talk about when it comes to energy in the home, there's two things you have to reduce and you have to produce. So if you're producing and then you're spending a lot of time, insulating the home, looking for reductions, when you do replace an appliance, you do it with a high efficiency and you start bringing that usage down and start
Hmm.
bringing that production up. That's how this grid is going to function. It's going to balance those and reduce your bill. That's the purpose, so that there's less of a draw from the energy provider. And that's what a lot of people, I think, don't quite understand, and that a lot of people in those industries fear because they don't necessarily get to charge a lot for what's going on. Another thing that people are scared of is I'm going to say this with an understanding that it might be misconstrued at first. That grid requires machine learning. So when you get a smart meter on your home, it starts to communicate with everything else in your house. And that scares people, I assume, because of movies in the past and different ideas. But what this is doing is creating efficiencies. If I want coffee in the morning and I was going to program it anyways, this thing will start to learn that I need coffee at a certain time and it will give it to me just before I need it. It will start the dryer a little bit later when it's cheaper.
Well, goes back to the same thing about people not wanting to be. Well, essentially, it's people don't understand how these kinds of things work. So I don't want to be a wiretapped or I don't want to be recorded, but they've had these smartphones in their pocket and on their ear for almost a decade now. All the information's there, the technology's there to utilize what we want it or need it to do. just because something has a negative connotation or has the possible potential of being used in a bad way doesn't mean it will be. Personally, for me, I wish I could afford to go through and like techno redo my whole house. That'd be amazing.
Well, and so what you're doing is you're creating these efficiencies
Hmm.
at a very small scale to offset so you're not using as much so that you don't worry about the consumption side. And I'll tell you right now that you've said a couple of things about smart devices, about having that cell phone in your pocket. I know in most cases we're preaching to the choir. Most of our listeners are sustainability minded. But if someone is trying to convince you that a smart home or smart system that reduces energy is bad, that is either A, fully misguided, because they're probably telling you online from their cell phone, the one thing that does have full tracking. Even if you turn it off and say you don't track, that just means you don't get the services. Doesn't mean that Google or Facebook or the rest of them aren't using it.
Correct.
Or they're trying to manipulate you in some way. Because chances are, I think everybody pretty much knows. If you're using a cell phone, every time you check a box on a service agreement, you're signing off a heck of a lot more than just let me get past this so I
Oh,
can use my app.
you're actually completely right. You'd be amazed if you read what those things entail.
So smart meters themselves are extremely helpful and allow us to connect in a lot of different ways. It's just that you're going to hear doom and gloom, scary, and all that stuff. Don't allow it. Understand that whoever is doing that is doing it purely for manipulation.
Absolutely.
So another thing that we're going to see that we're not used to is battery storage,
Hmm.
which I have mixed emotions on battery because of lithium mining and some other things. But what you're going to start seeing is one of two things, or possibly both. Tesla, for example, has the power wall, a unit that can be put in your home and run your house for several days on just batteries. So if the power goes out, you don't necessarily notice. It takes a while before it's actually gone for you. So any of these brief blinks or it's out for 2 hours, you don't know the difference. Another thing that I'm seeing from MIT is that they're talking about that when so many people are using electric cars, that the electrical grid on a smart system will start drawing from the cars all over the US. So if the power goes out on production for any reason, it can take the other sources that the homes are bringing in, wind or solar, along with the storage from vehicles to keep houses running. No, then that's a unique concept because that means you have battery storage without it's a dual purpose battery storage. It's your vehicle, but it's also kind of supplying the homes too.
No, that's a wonderful idea. And in an ideal world, that would be programmable. That way, you would have, let's say, you want to save enough power that could get you to the hospital if something terrible happened while you were at home, and then everything above that would be just rerouted to the house.
Well, and I think the MIT report that I had read was they were going to set it up so it would use the first 50% of juice. So if you've got a vehicle that gets 230 miles on a charge during a catastrophic event with electricity,
Hmm.
you're still going to have over 100 miles of use in your vehicle. So it is a unique concept. I don't know if that's the direction a full blown smart future grid will go in, but that is a way to help minimize. So, for example, if just Duran lost power because we're using smart microgrids during small town or small city, it probably wouldn't take more than one, maybe two. If we lost one of them, that power would be compensated by the surrounding area and
Hmm.
its vehicles if
Absolutely.
if need be. That is one of the things that is important to understand is how those can function. The other is feedstocks. You're right. We have to produce the exact amount we need on a regular basis. There is no storage. We have some storage. There's physical storage. Sometimes when we have too much electricity, we pump water up a hill into old coal mines that are in mountains. And in worst case scenario, they let that water run back down through a turbine. That is storage because you're using energy that you're going to recover back later. But
That's not.
it's a
That's
physical storage.
I think calling it storage is a loophole phrase. I mean, technically, it's not. You're storing water. You're not storing energy. Energy is produced when the water returns. It's a. I don't know. I don't know how I'd call that storage. It's weird to me.
What you're doing is you're using kinetic energy, you're using electrical energy to create a potential kinetic. So you're pumping it up a hill so later you can let gravity run it back down through
And
your turbine at a huge loss, by the way, a very
uh,
big loss.
yeah, I don't doubt it.
Currently, most regions are either coal, natural gas, oil, and nuclear, with a little bit of burning wood, a little bit of biofuels, little solar, little wind. That's not what the future grid can be. It simply can't. There's too much emissions in any of that stuff. It's gonna have to change. And what we're gonna see is a lot of wind, solar, hydro, and tidal. And there's a lot of discussion about using the water systems and all the lines in the cities to create a hydrogen fuel system.
Hmm.
So when you have way too much electricity, which you will in some cases, you'll desalinize water. So you have this fresh water, and you'll use a very large amount of electricity, because it's what it takes for electrolysis on this water to separate the hydrogen and the oxygen. That can later, it's stored that way, so later that it can be used for hydrogen fuel. But that is an on demand of system. So
Mm.
when you have low points in a lot of other systems, you can turn on these hydrogen fuel systems that will help make up the difference. And then you still have a large grid functioning on clean service, because even though you use a lot to desalinate, you use a lot to separate the molecules of water,
Hmm.
it's all coming from clean sources. So it is a complex concept to be able to balance all of these inconsistent sources. And that's where machine learning really has to step in. It's not AI. It doesn't get to make a decision. What it's going to do is continue the probability numbers so that it continues to anticipate better and better and better. So it knows when we're about to have too much. It knows when summer's coming. It knows that during the later winter months, we really start to struggle and we have to have an abundance of fuels to help
Hmm.
us. That is what we're seeing kind of taking the lead in a lot of the professional side. I will not say in the energy sector. I will say on the scientific side.
Okay.
Research is leaning towards this. Right now, what you're seeing from companies is a slow change, but they want to stay with fossil fuels.
So dragging their feet. Gotcha.
Well, that's where the natural gas rollout. Michigan just rolled out a huge natural gas network, and they call it clean natural gas because it has different emissions. It has less burning emissions than coal, and I say less burning emissions than coal because it itself is a greenhouse gas. So what happens is they do this huge rollout on natural gas because they say, and they can honestly say, it burns cleaner than coal. What they don't realize, and I think they do, but what they don't say is almost every collection site leaks. So when you have methane or natural gas like that, it is a 7 to 10 times greater greenhouse gas than carbon was when it was burned. So
Absolutely.
all you have is these little leaks all over the place, making it that much worse. Plus all the embodied energy to build out the network when it's really a stopgap to what we need in the future.
Well, but they're all leaks, so not only maybe it is a little more efficient the way it burns, but if it's leaking, they're gonna have to burn more of it anyways.
Well, and again, it's creating more emissions just leaking, it just existing. So now here's the big argument. What does it cost to fix the grid? And I don't mean from this point going forward, when I say fix the grid, I'm not saying put it back to its original state because we don't need 1920s technology. I mean, what does it mean or what does it take to create a national, robust smart grid? So I started looking it up. In the United States, first of all, so everybody knows, it is infrastructure. When they talk about infrastructure bills, not including electricity, because that's not quote unquote infrastructure, it certainly is. So is internet, so is roads, so are bridges, so so on and so forth.
Hmm.
If it what it take to run our country, it's infrastructure.
Hmm.
It The estimated cost to upgrade slash fix the United States' infrastructure system for energy is 4.5 to $5 trillion.
Jeez, oh Pete, that's a lot of money.
That is a complete ground up redesign with
That's that,
clean sources.
Yeah, but I mean, let's be real about that. That couldn't possibly all be done at one time. They'd have to pick the easiest sections to do piece by piece by piece. If nothing else, they'd have to do small sections to make sure that the science and the numbers and the mathematics are right, and it actually is going to stand up and work. So as that it's being redesigned and rebuilt and replaced, it's also going to be having the bugs and kinks worked out of it, because I guarantee they're going to make a mistake, and the first grid they put up is going to oopsie in the middle of storm season.
Yeah,
It,
there's going
it
to be, it has to go up in pieces. You're right. You cannot just roll out a national infrastructure like that. That's why a lot of these are considered to be projected over 10 years, which I
10 years.
still think it's pretty quick.
I
But
think 10 years is pretty ridiculous for the entire country. And I mean, normally I'm all about doing things fast, but we're talking about 330 million people and utilities that support them. And we're not just talking about houses. And people need to really think about that. We're not just talking about houses or barns or restaurants. We're talking about hospitals, state buildings, assisted living facilities. There is a huge amount of our population that really depend on a reliable grid, and not, and I don't mean like, oh, you like to play your Xbox. I mean, the power goes out, their oxygen stops pumping, and they die. So
yeah,
then those are the places they should really. I mean, I don't know if I'd start there, but I once they got it, kind of worked out to be a little more efficient, I think that's where I'd go first. I don't think it really matters if Sally on Brussels Sprout Avenue has more efficient power when we have 500 senior citizens in the hospital that need to have, dialysis and everything else.
you say Brussels Sprout Avenue.
I did. I did say that.
That seems very Hasbro, like life kind of names. But
It
so,
is.
so when you have those kinds of costs, people immediately freak out, especially when it comes to politics, which I think are the least useful people in this conversation. But
In
you
any
also
conversation.
you also have to look at what is lost by not doing it. We're going to skip catastrophic failures, apocalyptic, issues, the loss of life, or making it easy for terrorist attacks, or possibly just wildlife taking out large regions of our country. Well, all that aside, every time there's a power outage, it costs money. It costs money to repair it. It costs money for the pieces to put in to replace. It costs money for the workers. It costs money for residents. It is estimated that over $150 billion is spent by residents from damage due to outages, from basement damage from water floods to food left in the fridge. That every year residents spend $150 billion because
Wow.
we have so many outages. So there's that. There's also the 2013 White House report. And what it stated was the economy. The economy loses 18 to 23 billion dollars annually just in power outages. That is when commerce does not function.
Yeah, I guess I agree with that. I don't know I'm not familiar with the mathematics on it, but it makes sense. But on the flip side, though, so I don't know. I don't know, Michael. I think that commerce may halt in some places. You obviously can't go to the local diner if there's no power, but if you have a flood, you're definitely going to the hardware store.
The federal report shows that is the window of cost, that in 1 year our economy suffers a hit from 18 to 23 billion. And now with the addition to superstorms, so they used Katrina as an example,
Hmm.
how that affects the economy. The assumption that they're showing and their reporting was in the 2020s and later. So we're
Hmm.
kind of in it. That with superstorms approaching more and more often, it will be more like 40 to 75 billion dollars annually in losses to the economy.
Yeah, maybe, but you can't really use Katrina as a measuring stick. Katrina was extra bad. Katrina was terrible. Not every superstorm is going to do that. Every superstorm is going to completely flood an entire huge city and wipe out a reasonable population.
Well, actually, what they're saying is we're going to see more of those with climate change. We're going to see more superstorms, more flooding, as you're seeing on the West Coast with the fires. They're getting bigger, they're getting hotter, and they're taking more. And so, what they're saying from that report is that the catastrophic events that we see are bigger, stronger, and more deadly.
Okay, that
And
makes
that's
sense.
where they're calculating this. And this year, think about this: the floods that we've seen. the amount of damage that we've seen in the West Coast right now, the amount of damage done in Texas in February from being so cold.
Yeah, that
All
was
of these things accumulate to that cost.
okay.
So what you're looking at is, yes, it costs $5 trillion over the next 10 years, but you can start fixing those costs too. The cost to residents, the cost to to citizens within the country. And on top of all those financial things, how many people died because power went out in catastrophic events?
Yeah, that's terrible. And that's a big number. Honestly, it's I don't know, that kind of stuff should put in the perspective for people how important this stuff really is.
Yeah, when it comes to electricity, it is life or death. It is vitally important for most residents. And I know there's a lot of people out there who says, nope, I could live off the land. I guarantee you, long term is that's much more challenging than it sounds.
Even no, like just take that idiot for what they say. Maybe they can live off the land. That's great. It's not about you, Buster. For every person that's 35 and goes, I can live off the land. I can be a lumberjack and use these hands to build me a new life. Can your 95-year-old grandma? No,
Right.
she can't.
We are a community. We function together, and we are citizens of countries all over the world that need to be thoughtful to others and not just ourselves. So that's absolutely true. And I know we cannot do a full-blown analysis on a possible future grid in a half hour or 45 minutes,
Oh
but
no.
at least this gives everybody kind of an idea of what we're looking at for a grid in the future, the durability. So when you get a call that says you're getting a smart meter, or you have an opportunity to and you're buying a new appliance, you look for not only the high efficiency, but something that can communicate with the grid over time.
Mhm.
These are things that we have to be thoughtful with, because it is in the long term going to be how our kids and their kids reduce consumption electrically. So that's all I have this week. Did you have anything else that you would like to point out?
I know I was not that prepared for this week. I did as much reading as I could, but I did not take the time to put together what I thought the possible future grid would be. But also, I don't really know the math and the science behind it. I understand the concept. I know how to turn my power off and on. And I also know how much I don't know is a better way to explain that. So I don't have anything else to add.
Well, and a lot of the research when you're talking about future grid is not fun reading. It is simply not that fun to read, because it's almost always research articles, either from China, the United States, or the EU. So it's a little dry at times, but hopefully everybody got something from this episode. We hope you'd enjoy it. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend or on social media. If you want to support us in other ways, well, you can become a monthly supporter on the Anchor host site, or simply just leave a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. Those actually do help out quite a bit. It moves us up rankings, which, by the way, I showed you in Hungary, we were first, and now we're holding steady at third. How cool is that? So
That's awesome.
Hi, and thank you, all of you, for listening. But it does help us when you leave those reviews, because it really does move us up different charts. It does tell people when they search sustainability, we start showing up. So thank you again. And just remember, we only have to get a little better each day. A little bit each day will give us a big bit in the long run. So thank you for listening. I'm Mike.
And I'm Nick.
And we'll see you next week.
Feeling overwhelmed by climate change? Looking for sustainable and ethical brands to support? Then Ethic is perfect for you. Ethic is a simple browser extension that helps you find sustainable and ethical brands online. Learn more at ethyk.org, ethyk.org.